I thought my boss hated me, but he turned out to be my secret admirer. I swear Alan has made it his life's mission to ruin me. This morning I walked into the office 5 minutes early, feeling oddly optimistic. Maybe today would be different. Maybe my boss would finally acknowledge that I work hard, that I care about my job, Kevin. A cold voice snapped me out of my fantasy. I turned to find Alan standing in the doorway of his glass-walled office, arms crossed, looking like a men's magazine cover model. If models had the temperament of a medieval warlord. "Yes, sir?" I said, schooling my expression into one of barely contained politeness. He held up a document. "Did you proofread this?" I blinked. Yes?" His hazel eyes narrowed like I just admitted to arson. "Then explain why there's an incorrect comma placement on page 5. I clenched my jaw. "Sir, with all due respect..." "The respect is lacking," he cut in. I inhaled deeply through my nose. "It was 1 comma. And that 1 comma could be the difference between clarity and confusion." I gritted my teeth. "Right. Got it." He held the document out to me. "Fix it." I took it and turned to leave, but before I reached my desk, I heard him mutter, "And next time, get better coffee." I froze. "Excuse me?" Alan didn't even look up. "That coffee you brought in this morning? Too much sugar. Undrinkable." Oh, the absolute audacity. I didn't get coffee for him. I got it for myself. But sure, let me just keep his personal coffee preferences in mind while I suffer in his corporate torture chamber. Also, how dare he look that good while being that insufferable? 2 days later. It was a normal day at the office until the printer betrayed me. "Come on, you stupid piece of..." I smacked the side of the machine as it blinked its sinister little red light at me. "Paper jam. Again. Of course." I crouched down, yanking open the tray and pulling out a crumpled piece of paper when... "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I jumped, smacking my head against the printer. Wincing, I turned to find Alan looming over me, looking effortlessly expensive in his fitted suit. I rubbed my head. Fixing the printer?" His eyes flicked to the mess of paper in my hands. "Fixing it or making it worse?" I scowled. "Unless you have a magic printer fixing ability I don't know about, I'd appreciate a little faith in my skills." Alan exhaled sharply, his version of a laugh, I think. "Kevin, you have a unique ability to break things just by existing near them." I gaped. "That is not true!" He gestured vaguely. "The printer, the coffee machine last week, the office Wi-Fi incident." I scowled. "Okay, that Wi-Fi thing was not my fault. IT said it was a server issue." He gave me an infuriatingly skeptical look. I threw my hands up. "Fine, whatever. I'll just take this stupid report to the 3rd floor printer." Alan raised a brow. "Try not to break that one, too." I walked away before I could say something that would definitely get me fired. Honestly, how does someone so cruelly nitpicky have cheekbones like that? It's unnatural. It's unfair. I hate him. And maybe, just maybe, I hate how attractive he is even more. A week later, I was having one of those days. Alan had already torn my latest report to shreds, verbally, not literally, though I wouldn't put it past him. The printer had jammed again, and I was seriously considering tossing it out the window. My morning coffee? Spilled down my shirt thanks to an unfortunate door-related incident. So when I finally dragged myself to my desk after yet another meeting with my personal tormentor, aka Alan, I wasn't expecting anything remotely good. Which is why I nearly tripped over my chair when I saw what was waiting for me. A fresh cup of coffee. Not just any coffee. My coffee. Medium roast, 2 sugars, a splash of vanilla? Exactly how I like it. I frowned, looking around. Did someone leave this here?" My desk mate, Jenna, barely looked up from her screen. "Huh?" "The coffee," I said, pointing. "It wasn't here before." She shrugged. "Maybe someone felt bad for you." I scowled. Why would... And then I saw it. A tiny note tucked under the cup. "Rough day? Thought you could use this. Hang in there." No name. No clues. I stared at the note, then at the coffee, then back at the note. What the hell? Who in this office knew my coffee order? More importantly, who cared enough to do this? I glanced toward Alan's office, where he was currently frowning at his computer like it had personally offended him. Definitely not him, right? Shaking my head, I took a sip. It was perfect. For the first time that day, I smiled. Over a week later, the coffee incident wasn't a fluke. A week later, I found a small wrapped package on my desk. I looked around, but no one was paying attention. Okay, seriously, who keeps doing this? Jenna glanced up. What is it this time? I unwrapped the paper and my heart actually skipped a beat. A vinyl record. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. My favorite album. I flipped it over, half expecting a "From your friendly office barista" note. Instead, there was a tiny sticky note on the cover. Saw this and thought of you. Hope it makes your day better. I read it twice, then a third time. Okay, this is getting weird, I muttered. Jenna peeked at the record. Whoa, someone's got a crush. I rolled my eyes. Or they're secretly my mom. She snorted. Your mom's buying you jazz records at work? Fair point. I glanced toward Alan's office, then immediately regretted it. He was already looking at me, gaze unreadable. I quickly looked away, heat creeping up my neck. It definitely wasn't him. The man barely tolerated my existence, so why did I suddenly feel the urge to ask him anyway? 2 weeks later. At this point, the secret admirer thing had become a full-blown mystery. The coffee, the jazz record, the little notes, they kept appearing, always perfectly timed, always knowing exactly what would brighten my day. It was sweet. It was thoughtful. It was also freaking me out. Because who in this office knew me this well? That question had been bouncing around my brain all morning as I worked on Alan's latest report. And by worked, I mean stared at it blankly while overanalyzing every detail of my life. With a sigh, I flipped to the last page, and that's when I saw it. A note, tucked between the sheets. My heart did a weird little jump. I pulled it out quickly, unfolding the small slip of paper. You overthink too much. Just breathe, Kevin. I froze. The words. The phrasing. I had heard those exact words before. From Alan. 3 weeks ago, during a particularly stressful deadline, I had been spiraling over a formatting issue. And Alan, cold, ruthless, allegedly allergic to kindness, had sighed, nabbed his temples, and muttered in that deep, exasperated voice of his, You overthink too much. Just breathe, Kevin. I'd been too flustered, and mildly terrified, to process it at the time, but this note, it was him. It had to be him, right? I peeked up towards his office. Alan was at his desk, looking as serious and annoyingly attractive as ever, completely unaware that my entire world had just tilted sideways. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. And yet, I stared at the note in my hands, heart pounding. There was only one way to find out. 2 days later, I was trying really hard to act normal. Ever since I found that note, my brain had been in overdrive, desperately trying to reconcile two very different realities. 1. Alan, my boss, was a cold, overly critical menace who probably enjoyed making my life difficult. 2. Alan, my boss, might also be the same person, leaving me sweet, thoughtful gifts like some kind of secret admirer. It did not compute. So now, as I sat across from him in yet another soul-sucking meeting, I attempted to focus on his latest critique of my report instead of the fact that my heart was doing weird, traitorous things every time he so much as looked at me. Your analysis is solid, Alan said, flipping through the pages. But this section needs to be clearer. Got it. I'll rework it. He hummed, but instead of going back to his notes, he just looked at me. Not the usual glare of disappointment, not the usual I'm mentally firing you in my head expression. No. This look was different. Assessing, focused, and lingering. I swallowed. Something wrong? Alan blinked, like he'd just realized what he was doing. Then he cleared his throat, setting the report down. No, just make sure you run the revisions by me before finalizing. His voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. I squinted. Okay? He nodded, already turning his attention back to his computer, like the moment hadn't happened at all. But it had. And now I was certain. Something was definitely going on. 3 days later, I was overthinking again. Ever since the lingering look incident, I had been watching Alan way too closely. And to my horror, I was starting to notice things. Like how his tone had shifted. It wasn't as sharp as before. Still firm, still annoyingly precise, but softer. Like he no longer barked my name across the office, but instead said it low and steady. Almost like he was checking in rather than summoning me to my doom. And then there was this moment. I had been standing by the copy machine, waiting for my reports to print, when Alan walked past. Normal, routine, nothing out of the ordinary. Except as he passed, his hand almost brushed my lower back. Not quite. Not even close enough to be considered an actual touch. But close enough for me to feel the intention of it. I froze. Did that just happen? I turned my head, watching as Alan continued walking like nothing had transpired. But there was a tiny flicker of something in his expression. Something unreadable. Something almost guilty. And I knew. This wasn't my imagination. Alan was slipping. The question was, did he even realize it? A week later, I couldn't take it anymore. The looks, the notes, the almost touching, it was driving me insane. For weeks I had been stuck in this weird limbo, bouncing between, is he secretly into me and am I losing my mind? I needed answers. And there was only one way to get them. So naturally, I cornered Alan in his office. He barely glanced up from his laptop when I walked in. Do you need something, Kevin? His voice was cool, calm, totally unaffected. Meanwhile, my heart was doing gymnastics. I shut the door behind me. Yeah, actually, I do. He finally looked at me, one brow slightly raised. Well? I took a breath. Are you my secret admirer? For a second. A split second. I swore I saw his mask crack. His hand twitched against his desk, and his lips parted like he was about to say something real. Then, just as quickly, his expression shut down completely. What? His tone was flat. I crossed my arms. Don't play dumb. The notes, the coffee, the record. I'm not an idiot, Alan. It's you, isn't it? A tense silence stretched between us. And then, he laughed. A cold, humorless sound that scraped against my nerves. You think I have time to play childish games like that? I flinched. It's not a game. His face was unreadable, perfectly composed. You're imagining things. I suggest you focus on your work instead of indulging in pointless fantasies. Wow. Okay, that hurt. I clenched my jaw, forcing down the sting. Right, of course. How stupid of me. I turned to leave, but his voice, lower, softer, stopped me in my tracks. Kevin, I didn't let him finish. Forget it. Sorry for wasting your precious time. I walked out, heart pounding, face hot with embarrassment. But as the door closed behind me, I caught a glimpse of him, head bowed, fingers curled into fists like he was holding something back. And for some reason, that image haunted me more than his rejection. 3 days later, I wasn't about to let Alan get away with that weak denial. Sure, he said he wasn't my secret admirer. He acted like I was imagining things. But the way his jaw had clenched, the way his voice had faltered for half a second, yeah, no. That wasn't a man telling the truth. That was a man hiding it. So if he wasn't going to admit it, I'd force his hand. With a deep breath, I grabbed a sticky note and wrote carefully. Rough day? Thought you could use this. Hang in there. The exact wording from the first note he ever left me. If it really was him, he'd recognize it. If it wasn't, well, I just humiliate myself privately and move on. I stuck the note to a coffee cup, his usual order. No sugar, just a splash of cream, and placed it on his desk before ducking into the break room. From there, I had the perfect line of sight to his office while staying mostly inconspicuous behind a vending machine. Now, I waited. A few minutes later, Alan walked in, shoulders tense, brow furrowed like he was already annoyed about something. Classic. Then he saw the coffee. He stopped. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then, slowly, he peeled off the note, His fingers traced the words and something shifted in his expression. The tension in his shoulders eased. His lips twitched just barely. And then, to my absolute shock, he took out his wallet, folded the note carefully, and tucked it inside. I nearly dropped my soda. Oh my God. That was it. That was my answer. It was him. All this time, Alan had been the one leaving me notes. Alan had been the one paying attention, the one secretly looking out for me. And the way he smiled, so soft, so genuine, was a version of him I had never seen before. My heart was racing, my stomach flipping, my brain short-circuiting. I had my confirmation. Now, I just had to figure out what the hell to do with it. 2 days later, knowing the truth didn't magically fix everything. Yeah, Alan was my secret admirer. Yeah, he had been the one leaving me notes and gifts. But that just made less sense. If he cared, why had he spent years acting like I was his biggest inconvenience? Why tear apart my work, glare at me like I was a constant disappointment, make me feel like I was barely tolerated? The confusion sat heavy in my chest as I stared at his office door, debating whether to go in or just pretend I never figured it out. Meanwhile, Alan had been acting different. Not drastically, he was still sharp, still precise, but there was hesitation now, a crack in the armor, like he was waiting for something, or bracing for something, because maybe, just maybe, he was scared too. Scared that I wouldn't believe him, scared that I wouldn't want him back. The thought shouldn't have made my stomach flip, but it did. I ran a hand through my hair, sighing. If I was going to confront him again, I needed to be ready. Because this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, and whether I was willing to let go of the past long enough to see what was really in front of me. A week later. Of course the office was falling apart today. A major client was threatening to pull their contract, half the team was panicking, and somehow, I had ended up stuck in Alan's office, working late to fix the disaster. Just me and him, alone, with nowhere to run. Tension had been crackling between us all day, but we hadn't talked about it. Not the notes, not the lingering looks, not the fact that I knew everything now. And then, after hours of silent, passive-aggressive typing, it finally snapped. "This wouldn't have happened if you had caught the mistake earlier," Alan said, rubbing his temples. I scoffed, slamming my laptop shut. "Oh, so it's my fault now? Maybe if you weren't too busy pretending you don't secretly like me, we wouldn't be in this mess." The words were out before I could stop them. Silence. Alan went still. Completely, terrifyingly still. Then slowly, he lifted his gaze to mine. His jaw was clenched, his hazel eyes unreadable. "Excuse me?" I swallowed hard. "You heard me." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "This isn't the time." "No, now is exactly the time," I snapped. "You've spent years acting like I annoyed the hell out of you. But then, this? The notes? The gifts? You care. I know you do. So why," my voice caught, "why did you treat me like I didn't matter?" Alan exhaled sharply, pushing away from his desk. "Because I thought I didn't have a chance, Kevin." His voice was raw, frustrated, real. My breath hitched. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You're young, brilliant. You light up every damn room you walk into, and he let out a bitter laugh. "I didn't think you'd ever look at me the way I look at you." My heart was pounding. He turned to face me again, something vulnerable breaking through his usual composure. "So I pushed you away. Because wanting you and knowing I couldn't have you," he let out a shaky breath, "it was easier to make you hate me." Well, I had been expecting an argument, not a confession. The next day, the office was quiet. Too quiet. Alan's words still hung in the air between us, heavy and raw. "It was easier to make you hate me." For years, I had convinced myself that Alan barely tolerated me, that I was just some constant irritation in his life. And now here he was, admitting that all of it, every glare, every sharp comment, every impossible-to-please standard, had been some twisted way of protecting himself from me. I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair. So, let me get this straight. You've been secretly into me this whole time. Alan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Yes. For years. He hesitated, then nodded. I blinked. And instead of, I don't know, being nice about it, you decided to be an emotionally unavailable menace. He winced. That was not my best decision. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. No kidding. Silence stretched between us again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was different. Lighter. The tension that had been suffocating us for so long had cracked open, leaving something new behind. Something uncertain, but maybe hopeful? Alan exhaled. I didn't think you'd ever feel the same. His voice was softer now, less guarded. I thought keeping my distance would make it easier. That if I convinced myself you didn't matter, I wouldn't. He stopped himself, shaking his head. But you do matter. You always have. I swallowed. Hard. This was real. No more miscommunication. No more second guessing. I shifted, meeting his gaze. You're an idiot. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. I know. I hesitated, then took a step closer. But for the record, I don't hate you. Something in his expression softened completely. No? I huffed, rolling my eyes. No, Alan. If I did, this would be way less complicated. His lips twitched. So complicated, but not impossible? I hit back with a smile. Guess we'll find out. A week later. It started small. Little things that most people wouldn't notice. The way Alan stopped sighing dramatically whenever I walked into his office. The way his critiques turned into actual feedback instead of personal attacks. The way his glances lingered just a little too long, like he was still trying to convince himself this was real. And then one morning, I found a note on my desk. Not hidden, not anonymous, just sitting there, out in the open, written in his handwriting. You did well on the report. The client was impressed. So was I. I read it twice, then a third time, waiting for my brain to catch up. Alan had never complimented me outright before. Even when I knew I had done a good job, he'd always found some way to be frustratingly vague about it. I turned toward his office. Through the glass, I saw him sitting at his desk, completely focused on his screen. But the second I picked up the note, his fingers twitched against his keyboard. He was waiting. I smirked, grabbed a sticky note, and scribbled something back. Then, as I walked past his office, I casually slapped it on his door. I'll try not to let it go to my head. No promises. I didn't stop to see his reaction, but when I got back to my desk, I swore I heard the faintest chuckle from his office. A week later, Alan brought me coffee. Not as a "you look like you haven't slept" bribe, not as a "we're pulling an all-nighter, so suck it up" necessity, just because. He set it on my desk without a word, then hesitated, like he wanted to say something. I raised an eyebrow. Is this a peace offering? He rolled his eyes. It's coffee, Kevin. Don't make it weird. I grinned. Too late. And he smiled too. A genuine smile. I looked up at Alan, my boss, my former worst nightmare, my now very obvious admirer, and smirked. Yeah. This was definitely something more. 2 weeks later. I should have known Alan wouldn't propose like a normal person. No quiet dinner, no casual "be my boyfriend," no. That would be too easy. Instead, I walked into the office one morning to find a note on my desk. Not unusual. Alan had made a habit of leaving me little notes lately. Some teasing, some sweet, all very him. But this one was different. Meet me on the rooftop at 7 p.m. Don't be late. I frowned, flipping it over, expecting more. Nothing. No hint, no explanation. Just that. Suspicious. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, I was convinced he was either firing me in the most dramatic way possible, or finally murdering me after years of my sarcasm. Either way, I wasn't missing it. When I stepped onto the rooftop, I stopped dead. Fairy lights. Everywhere. A little dabble with my favorite food. A soft jazz playlist playing in the background. And in the middle of it all, Alan, in a suit, looking nervous. "Oh, Kevin," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "Before you say anything, yes, this is exactly what it looks like." I swallowed, my heart hammering. "Which is?" He exhaled sharply. "Making a fool of myself for you." My breath caught. "Look," he continued, stepping closer. "I've spent years pretending I didn't care about you. I was wrong. And when I finally stopped being a coward, I realized something." His eyes softened. "I don't want to spend another day without you. So, then he did it. The man, the absolute menace of my life, got down on one knee." My brain short-circuited. "I love you," Alan said simply, like it was the easiest thing in the world. "So, Kevin, will you give me the extraordinary honor of being mine? My love, my boyfriend, my everything." My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Did I love him? My brain flashed through every argument, every sarcastic remark, every ridiculous thing we had been through. All the notes, the glances, the years of pretending we weren't already each other's. And suddenly, it hit me. Of course I loved him. Why else would I have put up with him this long? I laughed away, blinking away the stupid burn in my eyes. "Alan," I said, grinning, "you're an idiot." He smirked. "Not an answer." I rolled my eyes. "Yes, obviously yes." His relief was instant. And when he pulled me into his arms, kissing me like I was everything, I knew. I'd been his all along. 2 years later, living with Alan was exactly what I expected. Annoying, ridiculous, and somehow perfect. Take this morning, for example. I woke up to the smell of coffee, which was great. What wasn't great was Alan standing in the kitchen, wearing my sweatshirt, drinking from my mug like he owned the place. Which, technically he did, but still. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "That's my hoodie!" Alan took a slow sip of coffee. "I know." I narrowed my eyes. "And my mug." He hummed in agreement, completely unfazed. "Anything else you want to steal while you're at it?" Finally, he smirked. "Your last name, maybe?" I groaned, covering my face. "You did not just say that." Alan chuckled, stepping closer and wrapping an arm around my waist. "Too early for bad jokes?" "It's always too early for that joke." He kissed my temple, smug as ever, and just like that, I forgot to be annoyed. Because the truth was, I loved this. The bickering, the teasing, the way he looked at me like I was the best decision he ever made. He pressed a coffee cup into my hands, my backup mug. Because of course he still had mine, and I sighed dramatically. "Fine, you're forgiven." Alan raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For being disgustingly in love with me." He chuckled. "Guilty." And as I sipped my coffee wrapped in his warmth, I knew. This was it. My forever. Conclusion. If you had told me years ago that I'd be standing at the altar marrying Alan of all people, I would have laughed in your face. Because it all started with glares, impossible standards, and the firm belief that he hated me. And now? Now I was looking into the eyes of the man who had loved me all along. The man I loved right back. Alan stood there, looking unfairly perfect, his hazel eyes warm with something only meant for me. I smiled, heart pounding. This was forever. The teasing, the notes, the stolen coffee mugs, all of it. And as we said I do, I knew one thing for sure. Loving him had been the easiest thing I'd ever done. The end. Have you ever had a secret admirer? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome!